I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, and it is my pleasure to take you today through this webinar briefing for the 16th meeting of the Chemical Review Committee. We will start the briefing with a PowerPoint presentation, and then afterwards we have a chance for having questions and answers and comments and to hear from you. So welcome again. We're very pleased to see so many of you attending this webinar, and also special welcome. I see many of the members of the CRC here with us, so it's great you're joining us. Yes, please do mute yourself during the presentation if it's not already the case. And we also rather recommend that you switch off your camera, then you can switch it on later on if you would like to intervene. So let's start with a short background on the CRC. I guess many of you are familiar with that. So the CRC is a subsidiary body under the Rotterdam Convention in charge of the process for recommending chemicals for listing in Annex 3. And there are two possible starting points for new chemicals entering the convention. The first is if parties adopt final regulatory actions to either prohibit or severely restrict chemicals at the national level. They're supposed to notify the Secretariat of these final regulatory actions. And then if they fulfill certain information requirements, and if there are at least two notifications from different regions, what we call the prior informed consent regions, then they get submitted for review by the Chemical Review Committee. They then review them against specific criteria in Annex 2 of the Convention. The second track is if developing countries and countries with economies in transition, they experience problems with severely hazardous pesticide formulations under national conditions of use, then they can propose these for being listed in the Convention, and the CRC, as soon as they receive one of these proposals that fulfill certain requirements, then they review them against Annex 4 criteria. If the chemicals meet these criteria, then they are recommended by the CRC for listing in Annex 3 to the Convention. For those of you following POPROC, I'd like to mention here that the CRC follows a bit a different order than POPROC. So on the CRC, first the CRC does the recommendation on the listing, and then as a second step, it develops the draft decision guidance document for those chemicals. So this is a guidance document that is then also forwarded to the meeting of the Conference of the Parties. And in particular, it is then used because if a chemical is listed then in the annexes of the Convention, then this draft decision guidance document is intended as a help for each country to decide whether they wish to still continue importing these chemicals. So it's helping them take their import decision. The CRC is composed of 31 government-designated experts with a specific quota among the 5 UN regions. And anybody else who wishes can also participate in CRC meetings as observers. So parties to the convention, those who are not specifically one of the 31 experts, they would be observers, but also the traditional observers like NGOs or industry association, they can follow these meetings as observers. Looking now at the upcoming 16th meeting of the Chemical Review Committee, it will take place from 8 to 11 September. And as a first time ever, and due to this COVID-19 pandemic situation, it will exceptionally be held online. And it's really the entire meeting, plenary sessions, pre-meetings, contact group meetings, if there are any, that will be conducted online. There are also pre-meetings on Monday, the 7th of September, and it's the pre-meeting of the Intersessional Task Group for PFOA salts and PFOA-related compounds, also at 1 p.m. Geneva time, and I'll get back a little bit later to what this pre-meeting is about. The meeting is generally online, but if the chair sees that there is a problem for participants to fully participate or make their views heard or express themselves during the online meeting, then there will also be the possibility to provide input by email. but this is really upon request. As a starting point, the meeting will be held online. The CRC always operates in English only, so the CRC 16 online is also English only. That's not specific to this online setting. You can see here the website of the meeting where you find all relevant information and documents, and also the email address of the contact person in the Secretariat should you still wish to register for the meeting. On this slide, you see some of the most important documents. If you would like to get an overview of how the meeting will be run, that's of course the provisional agenda, document number 1, and then also the annotated agenda that lays out a little bit for each agenda item what is the expected course of action. The scenario note is a description by the chair of how the meeting is intended to develop, and then the tentative schedule shows you in an overview table of which topics are supposed to be taken up which day. Here you can see the agenda of the meeting, of the CRC 16 meeting. You will notice it is quite a short agenda, and this is because the Bureau has decided to focus the agenda on time-sensitive matters, given that the online setting can be quite challenging. So these are really the matters that the CRC would need to look at ahead of the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Looking into the 2 substantive matters that will be in front of the CRC 16, the first one is decabromodiphenyl ether. So this chemical is an industrial chemical, a flame retardant that is used in polymers and high impact polystyrene, with end uses in electronic equipment, for example, computers, TVs, but also plastics, carpets, etc. It is listed in Annex A to the Stockholm Convention, and this chemical is already at the 2nd review step in the committee. So that means that at the last meeting, notifications of final regulatory action were reviewed from Japan, Norway, and Canada, and found to meet the Annex 2 criteria. And then a draft decision guidance document was developed in the intersessional period. It was also open for comments by observers, parties and observers. And the task of CRC 16 is to finalize this draft decision guidance document, and then the recommendation that was made at the last meeting and the draft TGD to be finalized at this meeting will be forwarded to COP10 for consideration for listing the chemical. And then the second big technical item on the agenda is perfluorooctanoic acid, its salts, and PFOA-related compounds. So this is also an industrial chemical used as a water, oil, and grease repellent, surfactant, coating agent, as a firefighting foam. And it's already also listed in Annex A to the Stockholm Convention with specific exemptions. And this chemical is a bit of a special case because actually it has already gone through both of the review steps. The work started at CRC 14, where the committee concluded that notifications of final regulatory action from Canada and Norway met all the criteria and recommended it for listing. And then at the last meeting, CRC 15, the draft decision guidance document was adopted. So generally, this chemical, the package to go to the COP is already completed. But what has happened in the meantime is that a new notification has come in from one of the 2 original notifying countries, so from Norway, because it has replaced its final regulatory action at the national level with a new one. So it has notified this new final regulatory action, and this is why the topic is coming back to the CRC, and the CRC will then have 3 steps to complete. Firstly, it needs to see whether this new notification meets the criteria of Annex 2 of the Convention. And if that is the case, the CRC will also need to look into the draft decision guidance document and in a revised recommendation for listing. And the special thing about this topic is that all of this is intended to be done at CRC 16. So normally we take 2 years one for the review of the notification, and then one for the review of the DGD. But in this case, because the DGD already exists, it will be taken up in one meeting, with the intention being that most probably only updates are needed, because the new notification is not completely different or completely new. It's mainly a question of the coverage of this final regulatory action, which CAS numbers have to be covered. So if the committee finds that the new notification meets the criteria, it would right away look also into modifying the recommendation to the COP and to see if changes on the draft decision guidance document are needed. And if this work can be completed, then the whole package would be sent to COP10 next year. This is now about the intersessional task group work that I mentioned earlier. The way the CRC operates is that when a new notification comes in, that is for review by the CRC already starts the work ahead of the meeting. They set up an intersessional task group to do a preliminary review of the new notifications. And during this task group work, a drafter and the chair prepare an initial draft report of whether the notification meets the criteria in Annex 2 to the Convention. Also notifications, or in case of severely hazardous pesticide proposals, it's Annex 4. Then task group members provide comments, so these are CRC members, and then drafter and chair prepare a revised report, which is posted on the web at least 3 weeks prior to the meeting, and then it can be commented upon also by the public, so members and observers can comment on this report. And the one on PFOA has been on the web since 7th of August, and any comments that are coming in, either now by email prior to the meeting or during the pre-meeting, are then dealt with at this pre-meeting. So this is the meeting that is taking place on 7th of September. It's the last meeting of this intersessional task group, and with that meeting, they're closing their work and submitting a conference room paper to the CRC. And then it's important to say that the CRC then still fully reviews the full notification. So this is really just a preliminary review with the intention of getting a first impression, but also to identify any missing information and to have some time to, for example, be able to go back to the notifying countries and get additional information from them if needed. You have here the link to the task group webpage where you find this draft report posted. And I would also like to refer you to the Handbook of Working Procedure and Policy Guidance of the CRC. This is a very important document for the operation of the CRC. It contains a variety of guidance and procedures. Some of them were adopted by the COP. Some of them are merely a collection of the CRC itself and how it dealt with certain cases in the past. So it helps them to keep consistency in their work and see how they dealt with specific cases in the past. Then there are some other smaller items on the agenda of CRC 16. One is about the rotation of the membership. This is just to provide some information. New members have started on the committee in May 2021. And actually, it's always roughly half of the members change every 2 years, so that there's always some continuity on the committee. And then there is the next rotation is coming up in May 2022. So it is at the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties that 17 new members need to be appointed. Two other matters that we already know that the committee will look at is firstly updates on this handbook. Nearly at every meeting, either the committee decides to do new updates or they had requested for updates during the intersessional period, and then they look into these updates. So this is why it's quite often on the other matters agenda. And then usually the committee also gets a report on activities that have been undertaken to facilitate effective participation in the work of the committee. This is now an excerpt of the tentative schedule contained in information document number 2. So here you can see that the pre-meetings are scheduled for Monday, and then Tuesday to Friday. There's every day from 1 to 4 p.m. Geneva time. there are the plenary sessions. You can see that there are not that many items within the session every day, so this is really to take into account possible challenges of an online meeting, but also if possible, we will try that any contact or drafting groups do take time within these time slots. As we understand, it's otherwise very difficult for delegates spread out all over the world to fully participate in all the discussions. So as far as possible, we can hopefully accommodate within these time frames. And the work, the technical work, so to say, starting with the PFOA agenda items. As I mentioned, there could be several steps involved in reviewing this chemical, so it might take a little bit of more time. And then on the second day, the work on the decabromidiphenyl ether draft decision guidance document will start. Turning now to some practical information of this online meeting. There are two important parts. The first one is the intranet side. That's quite an important web page where we have all pre-session documents, but then compared to the normal public website of CRC that you have seen, this then also contains in-session documents, conference room papers, the draft meeting report, any submissions made by members or observers, latest information on the daily schedule. So it's really important that you have access to this intranet side, and you will be receiving from the Secretariat sometime next week an email with the web address of this intranet page, and it's password protected, so you'll get a username and a password. And then the second part is to follow the actual online sessions on WebEx. You will also be provided the links for these online sessions and also some further guidance, though you already have received, yes, with the invitation to the technical trials, you already have received the user guide for WebEx. But if you're here today, then you're really familiar, so we're exactly on the same system as we are today. There are also technical trials this week. One was on Monday, and the other one is this Friday. And especially if you're not fully tested, like if you want to test to speak and all the functions and how to raise your hand, or to once again make sure that you can connect well, then please do join this second test session on Friday. And otherwise, you have some important email addresses and telephone numbers, especially the one for technical support. And then also, as I mentioned, there's this possibility to ask that email input be allowed if you're having problems to fully participate in the online session. And here's also the email address to make these requests during the meeting if you see that you cannot follow the online session. And then there's also the address for submitting conference room papers for members during the meeting. I will also briefly talk about the Stockholm Convention Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee, because normally this meeting, we call it POPROC, and the CRC, they held back-to-back as meetings in Rome, but this year this was unfortunately not possible due to the COVID-19 situation. And the POPROC is a bit the equivalent of the CRC under the Stockholm Convention, so they are in charge of this process of adding chemicals to the convention there. They review chemicals proposed for listing in Annex A, B, and/or C. They make the recommendations to the COP, and they also undertake other technical work that is assigned to it by the COP. So each of these two meetings and the bureaus, they have made a thorough analysis of what is the best way for them to proceed in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, taking into account the timelines they have for completing their work, their requirements, whether it's possible to streamline the agenda, etc. And they have come to slightly different conclusions. So this is why for CRC, we're going ahead with this online meeting on the originally envisaged dates. While POPROC has decided to postpone its meeting to 11 to 15 January, and it's still attempting to see if it's possible to hold the meeting actually face-to-face in Geneva. And if that's not possible, it will also be held online. And the decision will be taken in early October. There are also some linkages in terms of the work that the POPROC is currently doing. At its 16th meeting, the POPROC will look in particular at two topics. One is P4 salts and P4 related compounds. So these chemicals are already listed under Stockholm, and the POPROC has been tasked to look at an indicative list of substances that is actually covered by this listing. And secondly, POPROC will also review information related to specific exemptions for decabromonadiphenyl ether. So here's the full agenda that will be considered for POPROC 16. You can see they have 2 chemicals at the draft risk profile stage. So on the POPROC, there are 3 stages of review. The first one is the proposal stage, then the second one being this draft risk profile stage, and then there is still a third step, the draft risk management evaluation stage. So you have 2 chemicals at the second step, and then there's also 1 chemical at the first step, at the proposal step. And then you can also see that they are dealing with some other technical work, the specific exemptions for deca-BDE, but also for short-chain chlorinated paraffins, and then also this indicative list of substances covered by the P4 listing. Thank you very much for your patience. That's all now from my side. And with this, I would like to open the question and answer session. If you have any question or would like to make any comment, please either use the raise hand icon. So in the list of participants in the right-hand side of the screen, next to your name, you should see your name and then a little hand icon. And if you click on that, you will raise your hand and I can see you and give you the floor. Or otherwise, if you prefer, you can also send your questions in the chat box. And I see somebody already asked for the presentation. And yes, you will receive the presentation. There will be a little pop-up window coming on your screen, allowing you to download the presentation. My colleague has already started that. There's a little file transfer window. And then as soon as the name of the presentation shows up, you can click on it. Yes, now you can click on it and click on download, and then you have the presentation. Please, the floor is now open for any questions or comments. I see no raised hands and no questions yet. Don't be shy. Now is the moment if there's anything you would like to share with others or any question that you might have. Thank you. There's a question from a lady who's asking if the webinar recording will be available on the PIC page. And yes, we do usually record the presentation part of it, not the question and answer part, I think. But we do record that and post it on the Rotterdam website. And then my colleague tells me that we got a question from Julia Monterosa from El Salvador, asking if it's possible that the country send some information of the chemicals. And I'm afraid I do not completely understand that question. Could you please explain what you mean? I mean, when countries do notifications of final regulatory action, they do usually in their notification and in the supporting documentation, they always submit some information about the chemicals. So that is the intention, but it's of course also a bit focused on that information that the chemical needs that the committee needs to review whether the criteria is met. And then also in this draft decision guidance document, this information on the chemical that is provided by the notifying parties is compiled. Let me know if that responds to your question. And I see a request to send the presentation also by email. Yes, we can do that. So to download the presentation, you should have a little pop-up window saying file transfer in the middle of your screen. And then you have to click on the file name, CRC 16 presentation, and then you click on the download button. And then it asks you to confirm that you want to download the file and you choose a location on your computer. I hope that works. If not, we will anyway send it by email. And thank you. I see a question from Priscilla asking if parties can still send comments on the document from the intersessional task group on PFOA. Yes, this is absolutely still possible. So on the website that is indicated in the presentation, you can find the file and also the contact person for sending comments. And basically comments can come in until the day of the task group meeting. So until 6th of September, so to say, because then on 7th September, the group is sitting together and looking into all these comments. So the two options are either to send until 6th September comments by email, or otherwise to attend on 7th of September the meeting online, because that task group meeting is also open to observers, and you can also make your comments orally there at this meeting. Thank you, Zeigen, who asked the question about the procedure for contact group. So if a contact group is set up, that would be announced in the plenary room. So during the online meeting, the chair would say that we need further discussion on this in a contact group. And then you would receive, again, the link for joining that contact group meeting. So if it's a contact group that's open to all members, all observers in the room, anybody can then come to the contact group, and we would also announce when exactly it takes place and what is the procedure of getting there. but basically you would get a new link to join that online session for the contacts group. And then you just follow that link. And it will also be probably then on the intranet page so that everybody can easily join. Thank you, Adetona, for asking for an Africa meeting during this meeting. So generally, during CRC, it's a bit less than typically at the COP or an open-ended working group where there are always regional consultations. So I have to say from Secretariat side, we're not aware of these meetings. It might be that some members are coordinating a bit informally within the regions, but it's not as formally set up that there are regional groups that are meeting and consulting and that have specific meeting times, at least not that we're aware of from Secretariat side. Thank you. Thank you, Zeigan, who's asking why CRC and POPROC meetings are separated. So yeah, it really came about when looking into what are the requirements for each of the meetings that the separation came up. I mean, first of all, we cannot physically meet together. So if at all, it would have been an online back-to-back. But then also we found out that we have slightly different requirements. For example, for the CRC, it's quite important to meet good 6 months ahead of the COP because the CRC will be finalizing recommendations to go to the COP, and these need to be communicated to parties 6 months ahead. Well, if you look at the agenda of POPROC, they actually they will not finalize any chemical review ahead of the next COP. As I said, there are chemicals in the second step, there are chemicals in the first step. So it's not a year where POPROC will send recommendations to the COP for listing. So they were less pressed of time and could meet a little bit later than CRC, because January is actually extremely tight to meet the 6 month deadline to the COP. So they could postpone a little bit longer to see if they could meet face to face. And then also, if you look at their agenda, it's quite a heavy agenda. It's a highly technical discussion. So they saw it more difficult to be able to sort this out by an online meeting. While on the CRC side, the Bureau felt that it could be facilitated to prioritize the agenda, to look at these things that are very time sensitive, that should go to the next COP, but then to slim down the agenda in a way that it's not too much to deal with during an online meeting. So this is a bit why they came about with different requirements that then led to one meeting trying to wait a little bit longer if it could be held face-to-face, while the other one decided that they go ahead with the originally planned dates and keep it online. Then we have a question about the webinar in Spanish. No, we don't traditionally do the POPROC webinars in Spanish, among others also because the meeting will be in English only. So it's a bit less useful to brief about it in Spanish because the actual meeting has to be followed in English. I also have to say, but seeing how many people we have, normally the CRC briefings do not attract so much attention. So in the past, we did not have enough audience to offer the new languages. So it's something to think about for the future if we continue to have such a high interest in the meetings. Okay, let me say last chance. If you still wish to ask any questions, I will wait 2 more minutes maybe, and then we close this session if we see no more questions. Well, then thank you very much for attending this webinar briefing. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us anytime. We will be very happy to answer you. And I wish you a very nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.